Howdy Beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Howdy Beans podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Howdy Bean. Hope you're doing well, hope you're all good. As per usual, today I am so incredibly excited because I'm going to start a new series. Another one? Yes, I know, another one. Why not throw another one into the mix? As I said, this year is a year of experimentation, and this is another grand experiment that is going to take off and fly, I'm absolutely sure. And you will know why by reading the title of this episode, but also what I'm about to say in a couple of seconds after I've done the housekeeping. So today we're going to be looking at The Secret of NIMH from 1982. But before we get into all of that and more, I want to do with housekeeping because I like to keep my house nice and clean. And if I'm having the absolute brilliant, legendary, all-time favorite animators of all time in my house, Don Bluth, I want this place to be immaculate. So you can help me do that by making sure that if you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. If you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to like and comment. You can if you want, but if you listen on Spotify, don't forget to follow the podcast and to rate 5 stars. Also, you can find me on TikTok and Instagram. Just type in the Howdy Beans podcast and you'll find me there. So this new series is basically me wanting to look into Don Bluth as a animated creator, because I think he's an absolute legend and I love his work, to be honest. And looking back at a lot of his work and lots of he's done has had a big impact on me and my love of animation. Now, going back a little bit further, I looked into Blue Sky, and I did say once I finished looking at the Blue Sky movies that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to look into something that wasn't the norm. Now, most people, they look at DreamWorks, they talk going to Disney, they're going to Pixar. But as I was flicking through things I wanted to look at, and I was looking at the different sort of animation studios, I was thinking of like Nickelodeon, like those animated sort of movies that came out, the Rugrats movies and stuff like that. I was also thinking about like Sony, Fox animation, that sort of thing. As I was looking into these things, I kept coming back to this one person. I kept coming back to Don Bluth. Almost every corner you turn, you can feel his essence, his touch is somewhere. And I kept thinking, well, why not just look into Don Bluth himself? I'm a big fan of his. I think he's an absolute brilliant. I love his movies. So why not? So that's what this new series is going to be. Instead of looking at a studio, I'm looking at one guy and his work and the stuff that he's done. Specifically, the stuff that he's done under when he was actually making his own studio. So we're not going to look into when he worked at Disney and when he worked on like Sleeping Beauty, Fox and the Hound, things like that. Specifically, this is when he actually went off from Disney and decided to do his own thing by like Don Bluth Studios. And The Secret of NIMH, which we're going to talk about today, is the first thing that him and his partner, which I can't remember his production partner is, but I'm sure we'll get onto when we talk about the production, went into making. So I'm really excited to start this series. I'm really hoping that people like it and are interested, because I am absolutely fascinated with Don Bluth, and I haven't as of yet. I have bought it and it's currently on the way, but I don't currently have the time to not do this intro without doing it. But I have bought his autobiography. It's called Don Bluth Somewhere Out There, and I'm looking forward to give that a read. So hopefully by the time I get around to watching this movie, do the review, or by the time the next episode, which is American Tales, that I would have read his autobiography or at least started it by then. So fingers crossed. And as well with this one, The Secret of NIMH, I know this is based off Mrs. Frisby's Secret of NIMH, I think that's what it's called, book. So I've also bought that on Kindle, which I haven't started yet, but hopefully again by the time that I start the review, I would be done or halfway through, because it's not a very long book. It's a children's book, so I'm sure I will get through it. But I just wanted to sort of introduce this new series, this idea that looking into Don Bluth and his work, because again, I can't say it enough. I think the man is an absolute genius, and his movies are just brilliant, are just breathtaking. And yes, they are dark, but you know what? They are so memorable. And there's even some of these movies that I haven't seen, to be honest, like Rockadoodle. Never seen it. So I'm excited to go into this series. So, that is this new series. That's the idea behind it. And yeah, so let's get into it, shall we? So my memories of The Secret of NIMH. I've seen this movie a few times, to be honest. I won't sit here and say I am like a massive, huge fan, to admittedly, because like I said, I have watched it when I was younger, but it's not something I've seen in years, and it's not a movie where I can sit there and go, "Oh, it changed my life." I just remember this movie being very dark, and I think that's why I like dark fantasy now, because I am a big fan of the Black Cauldron, for example. I know that series. Well, say series. It's a series of books, but I know that movie didn't do very well. I know that a lot of people look back on that movie not as fondly, but I've always remember watching that movie when I was younger and absolutely loving it and just thinking it was brilliant and incredible. Yes, it was dark, but I was never scared. I was just like, oh my God, the darker the better, the more fascinating, the more sort of like I'm invested, because I've never seen anything like this before. And again, Disney never did anything like it before, and they still really haven't, admittedly. Whereas Don Bluth, he was doing that. Like, he knew that, yes, he was doing kids animation, but he never spoke down to kids. He never played down to kids. He's like, look, I'm telling a story. Stories that kids read or grow up reading are not all sunshine and rainbows. There are some stories that are dark. There are some stories that are scary or creepy, or, is a little bit sort of uncomfortable, but there's life lessons in that, and it's he never played down to it. So yes, his movies were dark, but I remember watching The Secret of NIMH, but never being terrified to be like, oh my God, that's incredible. And the way, like, Don Bluth was never scared to show blood. He would show blood in his shows, like you'd watch, say, The Lion King, for example, when Scar has got what's his name now, Mufasa. He's hanging over the cliff, and when Scar puts his claws into Mufasa's paws, at first you can see a tiny little sliver of blood around Scar's claws, and there's no treacle, nothing like that, but you can see a little bit of it. And then you see another shot, and it disappears. It's gone, and you never see it again. Whereas in like a Don Bluth movie, in this movie, when there's fighting, when a character is hit, they are gonna stay. That doesn't automatically heal. They're not Wolverine. Doesn't disappear. It stays there, and I like that. Not just for the sort of for the scene, and it makes sense for the story, but also the fact of it was that willingness to be like, look, yes, we know these are children's stories, but that doesn't mean that we have to talk down to children. Children are smarter than what people perceive them as, and children can watch movies like this and still enjoy them, and they did. And yes, they were dark, but brilliant. So that's my memories really of The Secret of NIMH. It's like being a very dark movie, but being the beginnings of like, I love this style. I want to see more of this. And we did, when he did more movies, like going back to like Titan AE, which is like the first Don Bluth movie that I looked into. Same sort of idea and concept. It was like the fact of beautiful visuals, absolutely stunning. Like, the way that they mixed 2D and 3D animation and did it fluently, and so well done that even today it still holds up in parts. And even it's only now that animating studios are starting to go back to that 2D hand-drawn style, but also have a mix of CG as well. So studios are now going back to what Titan AE did. It's just a shame that the story of Titan AE is pants. But that's not what we're talking about. The point is the fact of Don Bluth was behind it. And so Don Bluth has always been pushing that boundary of just animation. And it's a crime that even though he's still working today, it's a crime that he hasn't actually done a movie really since. I know he's been trying to do a Dragon Lair movie. He's been trying to get it off the ground for ages. And I think he got the backing and funding, but we haven't heard anything of that for a long time. So yeah, I don't know, but I'm just excited, as you can tell. Like I get to talk about Don Bluth, one of my favorite animators of all time, one of my favorite like animated like creators and just visionaries, and I love it. Anyway, so that's my memories and of this movie. Now let's get into the synopsis, shall we? So it goes as follows. So Mrs. Bisbee, a widowed mouse, must move her children out of their home in a field before the local farmer starts ploughing. Unable to leave because her son is ill, Miss Bisbee seeks the help of the nearby rats, who have heightened intelligence after being the subjects of scientific experiments. She receives an unexpected gift from the elder rat, Nicomundus. Soon, Miss Bisbee is caught in a conflict among the rats, jeopardizing her mission to save her family. So that is the synopsis. As for the cast, so Elizabeth Hartman as Miss Bisbee, Derek Jacobi is Nicodemus. I just said it, Nicodemus. Dom DeLuise is Jeremy. Arthur Mallet as Mr. Age. Hermione Baddeley is Auntie Shrew. Shannon Dorothy as Teresa. Will Wheaton as Martin. I didn't know Will Wheaton was in this. Jodie Hicks as Cynthia. Ina Freed as Timothy. And John Carradine as the Great Owl. And Paul Strauss as Justin. And that is your cast. As for the production, so I'm going to take a quick break now, and then when we come back, we're going to look in the production. And I'm back. So let's talk about the background of this movie. So the film rights to the book Miss Frisby's and the Rats of NIMH have reportedly been offered to Walt Disney Productions in 1972, but they were turned down. The Secret of NIMH was the first feature film to be directed by Don Bluth. On September the 13th, 1979, Bluth, fellow animators Gary Goldman, that's the guy that I was trying to name earlier, and John Pomeroy, and 8 other animation staff left the feature animation department at Disney to set up their own independent studio, Don Bluth Productions. The studio worked at first out of Bluth's house and garage, but moved to a 2-story, 5,000 by 500 square foot facility in Studio City, California, several months later. While they were still working at Disney, they produced a 27-minute short film, Banjo the Woodpile Cat, from 1979, which is free on YouTube. And if you go on my TikTok now, I've actually done a review of that movie. So if you want to go down to TikTok and check that out and pause here, you can. It is a brilliant film. I highly recommend it. Go check it out. Like I said, it's free on YouTube. Anyway, as a side project to gain other production skills that the company and their animation program were not addressing, Bluth asked Ron W. Miller, Walt Disney's son-in-law and the president and CEO of the company at the time, to view Banjo, but Miller declined. As Goldman recalled, that pulled the enthusiasm rug out from under us. We had hoped that the studio might like what we were doing and agree to buy the film and allow us to finish the short film in the studio, which would allow us to recoup what we had spent in terms of money and the many hours that we and the other members of the team had invested into the film. Before they started making Banjo, Miss Frisby and the Rats of NIMH was read by artist and story writer Ken Anderson, who called it a wonderful story. He gave the book to Bluth for him to read and make a film out of after Bluth finished the animation direction of Pete's Dragon, which is a wonderful film. I actually adore that movie. Anyway, Bluth later showed the novel to Disney animation director Wolfgang Reitman, who turned down Bluth's offer to make a film based on the book, explaining that Disney has already a mouse named Mickey Mouse, and they had recently made a similar film about mice named The Rescuers, which is another brilliant movie. However, Bluth also presented the novel to the other staff that would work for Don Bluth Productions later on, and they all loved it. 2 months later, former Disney executive James L. Stewart, who now had started Aurora Productions, called Goldman and told him about Anderson's idea of making a film based on NIMH. At Bluth and Goldman and Pomeroy's request, Aurora Productions acquired the film rights and offered Don Bluth Productions a budget of $5.7 million and 30 months to complete the film, tighter in both budget and schedule than most Disney animated films at the time. So that's your background. As for the writing, so one of the earliest drafts of the film was written by Stephen Barnes, who received a creative consultant credit in the final product and was closer to the original novel. The story would have focused more on the rats and their lives at NIMH as it did in the book, which was reduced to a short flashback in later versions to bring Miss Brisby and her plight into the forefront. It also included from the book a female rat named Isabella, described as a young, cute, somewhat motor-mouthed rat with a crush on Justin, who was ultimately left out, with much of her dialogue given to Nicodemus. A revised synopsis dated July the 2nd, 1980, by an unattributed author would take the film closer to its completed form, which ended with the mysterious disappearance of the rats, leading the characters and audience to wonder if they ever really existed or were just an elaborate illusion. Bluth himself would later make several changes to the story, most notably with the addition of mystical elements not present in the original novel. He explained that regarding magic, we really believe that animation calls for some magic to give it a special, fantastic quality. This was most apparent in the magic amulet given to Miss Brisby, which was meant to be a visual representation of her character's internal power, something harder to show on film. The object was also meant to introduce a spiritual aspect to the plot, with the directors remarking, "The stone or amulet is just a method of letting the audience know that Miss Bisbee has found courage of the heart. Magic, maybe. Spiritual, yes." In the same vein, Nicodemus, I'm going to call him Nicodemus because I think that's how they pronounce it, was made into a wizard to create more mystery about himself and the rat colony. Among other changes, the antagonist, Jenner, was given much more prominence in the film, being only mentioned in the book as a traitor who leaves to add drama to the narrative by giving it a more visible enemy. In the movie, Justin succeeds Nicodemus as the leader of the rats to give his character more of an arc and to allow him an opportunity to grow and change. Unlike the original work, Justin does not rescue Miss Bisbee from the cage at the Fitzgibbons' house. Instead, she helps her children without the rat's assistance by using the amulet, once again giving focus to her personal story. As Bluth put it, The Secret of NIMH is really a story about Miss Brisby and her need to save her children. If the rats save her children, then she hasn't grown in the film. During the film's production, Aurora contracted Whammo, the manufacturers of Frisbee flying discs, with concerns about possible trademark infringements if the Miss Frisbee name is O'Brien's original book was used in the film. Whammo rejected Aurora's request for waiver to use the same sounding name to their Frisbee in the film. Aurora informed Bluth and company that Miss Frisbee's name would have to be altered. By then, the voice work had already been recorded for the film, so the name change to Miss Brisby necessitated a combination of re-recording some lines, and because John Carradine was unavailable for further recordings, careful sound editing had to be performed, taking the B sound of another word from Carradine's recorded lines and replaced the F sound with the B sound, altering the name from Frisbee to Brisby. So that is your writing. As for casting, so Goldman described the casting process as exciting, fun, and sometimes strange. He stated that focusing on the characteristics of each character, the voices and acting abilities were crucial, saying that using voices that added to a film's texture was part of the team's philosophy in the development of a film. Goldman found the most memorable casting decision to the Dom DeLuise for the character of Jeremy, which Goldman, Bluth, and Pomeroy all considered when they watched the 1978 film The End in their respective homes, independently of each other. Elizabeth Hartman was cast as Miss Brisby, with Goldman calling her performance in A Patch of Blue so believable and sincere that we all felt that she was right for the part. Pomeroy suggested Jarrett Jacobi, who starred in the 1976 miniseries I, Claudius, to play the part of Nicodemus. Peter Strauss, whom the team previously saw in another miniseries from 1976, Rich Man, Poor Man, was cast as Justin. Paul Shinar was assigned to play Jenner since the staff liked his dark, powerful voice. Shakespearean actor John Carradine was perfect for the dark, ominous Great Owl, while Aldo Ray was assigned to voice Jenner's reluctant accomplice, Sullivan, whom Goldman said also had a great distinctive voice. I love how they actually looked like they put their research and work into finding people that matched the characters. You know, it's not like today we just like, oh, we'll just get Chris Pratt to do it because Chris Pratt, you know, is a celebrity and he brings in the money. It's like, no, bring in the voice people who had the voice of the characters, bring in the voice actors. I watch I listen to a podcast on Spotify, which is like the Jim Cummins podcast. And if you don't know who Jim Cummins is, you will definitely know his voice. He's like Ray the Firefly. He's Darkwing Duck, Bobcat, he's done loads. Okay, like he's Hondo Ohnaka in Star Wars. Like this guy has been in the business for a long time. I think he actually is the voice of Winnie the Pooh as well. And from listening to that and reading the casting, he talks to other voice actors, and they even say in his podcasts, each one of them all have the same sort of thing. As like, back in the day, it used to be the fact of it was the voice actors or the right person for the right role were the people that were cast. Nowadays, it's the voice actors maybe, but they want the big names. They want the big, like Will Smith, The Rock, Kevin Hart. They want those sort of people to do the voices of characters instead of the voice actors, which is fine. But they're actors and not voice actors, and it's two different things. And I like that with this movie that they were like, yeah, we got actors, but we got people whose voices match the characters. They actually put the work in. They didn't just get that big fancy names because they thought it would make the picture better and make it sell better to audiences. It was like, no, we're going to get the people who sound right for what we want to do, and absolutely love and appreciate that. Anyway, as for the animation, to me, the most important part. So, the production of The Secret of NIMH lasted from January 1980 to early June 1982. The studio set out with the explicit goal in mind of returning feature animation to its golden era, which, in my opinion, they greatly achieved. Concentrating on strong characters and story, and experimented with unusual and often more labor-intensive animation techniques. Bluth believed that older techniques were being abandoned in favor of lower production costs, and that the only way that animation could survive was to continue traditional production methods. I completely agree with him there. Among the techniques experimented with on The Secret of NIMH were rotoscoping, multiple passes on the camera to achieve transparent shadows, backlight animation, where animated mats are shot with light shining through color gels to produce a glowing areas for artificial light and fire effects, with multiple color palettes for characters to fit in different lighting situations, from daylight to night to warm environments to underwater. Miss Brisby had 46 different lighting situations. Therefore, there were 46 different color palettes or lists of colors for her. 2 modern computerized versions of the multi-plane camera were also manufactured for this production. Objects like the bird cage that Miss Brisby escapes from, the boats used by the rats, were made as physical models, painted and photographed, and eventually exorated onto animation cells, which were then painted. Also, Miss Brisby's home and several other locations were built as a physical model and photographed from different angles. These pictures were used as references for the layout of artists. That's brilliant. I absolutely adore that. To achieve the film's detailed full animation while keeping to the tight budget, the studio strove to maximize its use of time and resources. The crew often worked long hours with no immediate financial reward, though they were offered a cut of the film's profits, a practice common for producers, directors, and stars of live-action films, but never before offered to artists on an animated feature. Producer Gary Goldman recalled working 110 hours weeks during the final 6 weeks of production. Around 100 in-house staff worked on the film, with the labor-intensive cell painting farmed out to 45 people working from home. Many minor roles, including incidental and crowd voice work, were filled in by the in-house staff. The final cost of the film was $6,385,000. The producers, Bluth, Goldman, and Pomeroy, and the executive producer at Aurora mortgaged their homes collectively for $700,000 to complete the film, with the understanding that their investment would be the first to be repaid. The film was the 6th animated feature to be presented in the Dolby Stereo sound system. In animating Justin and Jennifer's sword fight, the animators reference similar sequences in films such as The Avengers of Robin Hood and Vikings from 1958. And that's it, really. But I love that. I love just the fact of, they were so sort of like rebels. They were just like, look, we want to do what we want to do at Disney. Disney's like, no, we're not doing it. We already have a mouse. And then Don Bluth and company is like, okay, we're going to do our own thing. And then go forth and do it, and spent 30 months or thereabouts to make it, and put the time in, put the effort in. Nowadays, we'd call that crunch. But still, back then, put the time in, put the effort in, having such a passionate work. No, not doing it for any extra sort of financial gain, just because they have such a love and passion for what they're creating that they want to get it right. And you'll find this when you look at when we get look around to looking at other Don Bluth works, that there's only one person who's ever really it's for a long time. Like, you can say nowadays it's a bit differently, but for the longest time there was only one person, one studio that was biting at the coattails of Disney constantly, and that was Don Bluth. He was their biggest threat for the longest time. Even so that Disney would release movies, and Don Bluth would release them at the same time, which you could probably say was a bad idea. Really, what Don Bluth should have done was did it after or before a big Disney release, but he didn't. He would always put it against, and people would he was the biggest competition for Disney. And I just think that's such a rebel thing to do. But again, it's so Don Bluth, and that's why we all love him and love his work, because he has such passion for what he does and what he creates. Anyway, that is everything I have to say. I am just really excited to get into this one. So I'm going to go off and watch this movie. Hopefully by the time that I get round to watching it, because I have a really busy schedule at the moment, I would have read or start reading Mrs. Frisby's and the Rats and the Secret of NIMH, the book, and hopefully I would have started and got through Don Bluth's autobiography as well. That would have arrived by then, so I can give a little bit more clarity into his mindset and what kind of person he is as well, because you know me, I love to do my research. So I'm going to go off and watch this movie, and then when we come back, we'll talk about first impressions, talk about the story, production, art, overall thoughts, a bit of trivia, and then we'll wrap things up nicely. So I'll see you all in a second. And welcome back, everybody. So I've now watched The Secret of NIMH, but before we get started, I want to do a little bit of signposting. So as you all know, this is the beginning of my adventure into the world of Don Bluth. As I was doing my research, I found that Don Bluth had made 2 short films before making this his first ever sort of feature-length movie, which is The Secret of NIMH. Now, I have done reviews for them, if you want to go check them out, if you're interested in my sort of Don Bluth journey. And because they're only short movies, I decided to put them over onto my TikTok. So the first one came out in 1978 called The Small One, which was for Disney. And the second one was called Banjo the Woodpile Cat from 1979. Both of my reviews for them are now up on my TikTok, as well as my review of the book of this movie, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. So if you want to check out all of those reviews, then by all means, please do go to my TikTok and check them out on there. But obviously, if you want to stick around and listen to this review first, then I completely understand. But this is why you should be following me on TikTok. Anyway, I just wanted to get that out the way before we get started. So, as for sort of The Secrets of NIMH, my first impressions, this movie is brilliant. It is. It's really, really good. I forgot how much I had forgotten about it, because one thing that I wanted to do before I jumped back into this movie is that, as I said in the introduction, I wanted to read the book first. And I finished the book today and actually watched the movie today as well. And what I liked so much was the fact of how different the book was. Obviously, I won't go into it too much. Obviously, I did a full review over it on TikTok, but I was just surprised of how where the direction that the book goes. Actually not remembering anything of the movie at all. I remember watching it, but not really remembering the story completely. For some unknown reason, I remembered a wedding that never happened in this film. I think I'm getting my sort of stories crisscrossed somewhere with like animated rats potentially and mice. But I remember there being a wedding and something like that, and then something to do with an amulet. And she's gonna get married, and then all of a sudden the amulet comes alive, and then something happens, and the day is saved. This is what I remembered in my head. So when I'm reading the book, I'm sitting there going, "When's the wedding? When's the wedding coming?" And then obviously the twists and the turns that the book goes, and sort of the ideas and concepts that the book goes. I was like, "Oh my god, this is actually a lot deeper than I expected." And I was like, "Oh my god, I'm like for a book that's only 239 pages thereabouts. It was really good. So when I went into the movie, I'm like, okay, now I've read the book. I'm interested to see the differences. Now with the movie, one thing I will say that Don Bluth did is that they went in a more darker direction, which, to be honest, for me isn't an issue. I actually appreciate that. Because, as you all know, I am a weirdo and I like my dark, gritty fantasy, especially when it comes to animation as well, especially like during like the 70s and 80s. Those sort of dark, sort of like the Black Cauldron, for example, those sort of stories, I love it. So to read the book and to it be very lighthearted, very kind, very sort of interesting and whimsical, and the twists and the turns that it takes into that, and not really expecting anything but getting a lot of out of it, and then to watch the movie and it to take a really dark turn, but while also following the story that I know, with a few changes here and there, which again I'll talk about a bit later on. I was pleasantly surprised. I genuinely, when I was like, oh my god, Don Bluth was able to not just tell the story well, but make it its own thing by changing small things here and there, but also make it dark, make it gritty, make it a bit more like the book's interesting, but make it a bit more interesting for children, make it more fanciful, make it a bit more sort of a classic story of adventure and the love of a mother has for her children, and the lengths a mother will go to protect her children, to save her children, to, you know, this idea of, you know, if a baby's trapped under a car, a mother can sort of just have some primal strength and be able to lift that car off a screaming child and, you know, save it. You know, we've heard stories like this before, because it's not just hearsay. Like I have heard stories where this has generally happened, and there is a part in this movie where that kind of thing does happen. Which again, I love the iconography and sort of the subtext. But yeah, first impressions, I was generally impressed. I really was. The animation's gorgeous. The like the themes, the voice acting, everything was just like, oh my god, this is an adventure. And again, the movie is only an hour and 25 minutes long. It's not a long movie, but for a movie that's this short and, you know, follows the book quite closely with a few changes here and there, with a darker tone. They show blood, which again I really appreciate, and I'm sure I'll talk about that in a minute. I was generally just really happy. I was like, I went in expecting nothing. A bit confused, I don't know why, as to why I thought there was going to be a wedding, but gladly surprised when there wasn't, and, you know, that it followed the story a lot more closely. There were a few things here and there where I was like, I like that they changed it, but other changes I was like, I wish they didn't change that, or I wish we had a bit more time with other things. But overall, first impressions, brilliant. Loved it. You know, Don Bluth and team was able to smash it out of the park with this one, and you can see as to why, you know, they were like, okay, let's make that. Steven Spielberg was like, let's make a movie together, and they did. They made an American Tale, which I think is the next movie after this one. But again, we'll get there when we get there, which has become a new tagline of the podcast, which unintentionally, but it's become a new thing that I've started doing for the podcast. Anyway, so that's my first impressions. As for the story, so I'll give you the story up until a point, and then from there, I'll tell you the difference between the book and I'll tell you the difference between what you get in the movie. So the basic premise of this story is that Mrs. Frisbee, they live in a farmer's field. Her and her 3 kids. Her father, her husband, Jonathan, has recently died, right? And she's a single mother and she's trying to look after her kids. And then her young son, Timothy, becomes ill. So that she goes to one of the oldest, wisest mice in the valley, Mr. Ages, and asks him, is there a cure? Is there any way you can help my son? So Mr. Ages comes and has a look at her son, basically finds like he's got pneumonia, but don't worry, I've got a cure. But because he's got pneumonia, this will bring him back, but he needs to stay warm. If he drops even just a little bit, the pneumonia will come back with force and he will die, right? Luckily, the summer is coming, the warmer weather is coming, so that you should be okay. The problem is, when the summer comes, Father Fitzgerald plows the field. The problem is, when he plows the field, all the animals usually leave the meadow, leave the field, and go off to greener pastures, and then they come back once he's finished. The problem is, because Timothy's not very well, Mrs. Frisbee or Mrs. Brisby in the movie can't move her son, so she goes to the Great Owl, and the Great Owl tells her, in order to save your son, you need to go find the rats. And she's like, well, I don't know any rats. And she goes, go to the rose bush. The rose bush is where the rats are hiding, and seek their aid. I'm kind of shortening it. There are little bits I'm missing out here and there, but this is basically the premise. So she goes to the rose bush, she meets the rats, and while she goes there, she meets Mr. Ages, who she goes, look, I really need to help with my son. And I went to go see the great owl, and the great owl said to me, if I go to the rats, they'll help me somehow, save my son. So Miss Page is like, okay, come with me. She goes into this like underground sort of tunnels. Now, how I imagined it is completely different to how it was shown in this movie. So when I imagined it, for some unknown reason, this is how my imagination works, especially when you start learning who the mice are and the whole twist of the mice. When you start learning that, my brain went to sort of industrial, kind of like very sort of concrete-y, very sort of a lot of buildings, a lot of again, I know it's going to sound silly, but at the same stage, this is how my imagining works. Tiny little forklift trucks, little sort of makeshift cranes and things like that. Little sort of mice with hard hats, rats with hard hats on and things like that. That was my interpretation, kind of like an underground bunker. Imagine if like the rats were building an underground nuclear fallout shelter, basically, but on a grander scale, where like hundreds of thousands of rats could live like in a society, a utopia, right? That's how I imagined it. In this movie, again, Don Bluth being Don Bluth and going the lot more darker tone in the character designs, like the Great Owl has a lot more sort of darker, creepy, sort of wise, but sort of uneasy sort of appeal to him. It's the same with Nicodemus later as well, which again I'll talk about Nicodemus and the rest of the rats in a minute. But how it was shown with Don Bluth, it shows it very sort of fanciful, where it's like you can tell that they made it themselves, where there's a lot of, it's kind of medieval, where they're all wearing sort of medieval sort of tunics and clothing. There's a lot of stone structures that are built that, where they have all their food storage. I love the one bit that Don Bluth did where they're going through and they meet Justin, who is one of the rats. And again, I love Justin. He's brilliant in the book and he's brilliant in this as well. They meet one of the rats, Justin, where Mr. Aegis and Mrs. Brisby does. And they go into basically what would have been an old lamp, an old glass lamp. They get into that. They close the door. They cut the rope. The rope propels them down into water. It reminds me of like going down into like a bathysphere, deep into the water, like a diving bell, or even like going down to Rapture and like Bioshock. As they're going down, they go all the way down, straight into this like underground sort of cavern. Then the doors close, all the water gets drained out. And I'm like, that's so cool. That's so neat, but it also adds to the fact of these rats aren't your ordinary sort of typical rats that we get in the real world. There's something about these rats. These rats are clever. These rats are very ingenious. So they go down, and as they go through this like little sort of city, they go to this council. And there's a council meeting. Now, this is kind of where it starts to converge from the book and from the film. So I'll carry on with the film. But I'll talk a little bit more about the book a little bit later. So as the movie goes in, they're talking. She goes to see the head rats, and they're having a discussion because basically, without giving too much away, there's a plan, and they keep calling it the plan. They keep referring to the plan. That's what they call it. And I won't give the plan away completely, but there's a plan where they don't want to stay where they are. They want to go somewhere else, right? They want to start anew. But there is another rat called Jenna who is like, well, no, why should we leave? Because where we are is perfect. We have made a utopia here. We've made a home here. It's perfect where we are. Because where they are, they're siphoning off electricity from the farm. So they've got running lights, they've got running water, they've got crops and agriculture. They've got a city. They are sophisticated. But Nicodemus is like, well, no, we've grown smart enough to realize that we should no longer steal, that stealing is wrong, that we need to get rid of our sort of primeval sort of ways of stealing and taking. And instead, we need to focus on ourselves, growing our own crops, producing our own food, electricity, energy, power, that sort of thing. And obviously, in the books, they're very intelligent. They read books, so they've been reading books about agriculture and stuff like that. So they've been learning how to build a society, how to build politics, structured utopia, that sort of thing. It's really fascinating. Really, like they go full in depth into it in the book. It's really, really cool. But Jenna's like, well, no, why should we leave? We've got what we want. And again, in the book, it's a little bit different. So in the book, Jenna and a few rats have already left. So Jenna goes off with his rats and goes, well no, if you're not going to stay here, I'm just going to go off and I'm going to start my own sort of utopia. And he goes off and he starts his own sort of little group where Nicodemus and the rest and Justin and all that stay. And they realize, okay, we can't stay here any longer. We have to go. And following on more with sort of the film, without giving too much away, Jenna is the big villain in this. I originally thought it was Nicodemus just because the way he looked. I for some reason my memory was like, oh, it's Nicodemus who is the villain. And again, my issue with the way that they portray him in this is that I imagined Nicodemus to be young, youthful, whereas in this he's kind of portrayed as an old rat. He's got a long beard. He's all drawn. He's got golden eyes. He looks very sort of full of magic, but at the same stage, very creepy, very sort of, dangerous is possibly the wrong word, but very untrustworthy. He seems skeevy. You know what I mean? There seems something about him where he just feels a bit off. But Jenna is the villain in this one. And again, I'm going to skip ahead a bit. I'm going to skip. So the rats basically agree to help Mrs. Frisbee out because of who her husband was. Her husband is one of the mice that helped the rats escape from NIMH. And again, I don't want to go into fully about NIMH because it's a really cool twist, and it's one that I wouldn't have seen coming if I watched the movie. And it's a twist I definitely didn't see coming in the books, and they go into more details about it. But I'll give you the long and short about it. Basically, the rats are they're lab rats. They're experiments that they were experimented on by scientists, and they injected them, and these injections made them super smart. They made them bigger and made them stronger. Now, normally in a horror sort of film, especially like I think is it James Herbert? Is it James Herbert or Frank Herbert? Basically, the man who wrote the rats, right? If it was a horror story, it would be basically they got bigger, got smarter, and realize that they shouldn't be taking orders from anybody else, and then just starts to eat and devour humans and then tries to dominate. Whereas with this one, as they grew smarter, they realized that, okay, we shouldn't be here. We're not lab rats. So they escape, and that's when they started with their own home. And in the book, it goes into more detail about they found books, they found the toy maker, and the toy maker was an old man who had died in the woods. It doesn't really go into detail how he died, but he was in a suit and he looked very sort of professional, prim, proper, and his van was hidden for some unknown reason in the woods nearby to where the old man had died, and that they found this old man, and this all happens in the book, by the way. This doesn't happen in the movie. That they decided to give him a proper burial, but because they're only small and they couldn't dig, they just got loads of leaves and twigs and things like that, buried him, and wrote a little bit, because by this stage they can read a bit, they can write a bit. And they wrote a little passage saying, here lies the toy maker, blessed be with him, or something like that. And then they go looking and they find his big red truck. And because he was a tinkerer, because he was a toy maker, there was a lot of robotics, there was a lot of cogs, there was a lot of tools and things like that. So they use that. They call it the gift of the toy maker. And this toy maker is very honourable to them, because without him, they wouldn't have been able to build this little society. And within using those tools, they were able to build this world underneath. And again, that's where my brain started to sort of go towards tiny little cranes and little forklifts, because I would imagine that they would have built like little vehicles, because they've got electricity. Why not build little vehicles and things like that? I just thought that would have been really cute, little rats driving around in little forklift trucks and have their own little society. Obviously, this movie goes more fantasy based, which again is fine, with swords and tunics and things like that. Like, I'm all here for it, but I don't know. Part of me just would have liked to see a tiny little man in a sort of high vis jacket and a sort of safety helmet. I just thought it would have been cute. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. So they agree to help because you realise how smart they are, and obviously in the book they move Mrs. Frisbee's house. They put it to a safer part of the field so that when the plough comes, she'll be safe. So her and her children, especially Timothy, won't have to move during the ploughing season. And that when Timothy is better, then they can move to a better place for the summer, and then they'll come back there for the winter. And obviously, without going majorly into it, in the books, they basically go, once they've helped Mrs. Frisbee then decides, well, I want to help you guys out. And that while within doing so, I heard some information while I was around the farmer's house. And basically, I heard that some rats had been sort of killed. But they were rats that were in like a little, I can't remember if it was a toy store or something like that, but they were found basically messing around with some electronics. They were all killed. You find out later who they are, which about spoiling it in the books. And basically, the people that go in to kind of remove these rats are from NIMH. Now, I don't know if NIMH is the name of the doctor or NIMH is kind of like an acronym for something. The rats never say, and it's never mentioned in the books, and it's never really mentioned in the film. Well, unless I think it is mentioned in the film. I think in the film they call him Dr. NIMH. I think in the film potentially. I might have heard it. I'm not entirely 100% sure. But this is where like the differences are. So in the book it goes off and Mrs. Frisbee warns the rats. The rats leave the hovel. They fill it all in so that they remove all the wiring, they move all the carpeting, they move all the electricity, they move all that out because they've been building this for like 4 years. They fill in all of the lower chambers, only leave the top layer chamber, fill it with garbage, fill it with crap, basically kind of make it an atypical version of what you'd imagine a rat's hovel to be like. They left a few rats behind to kind of act as a diversion. All the other rats left. And then when the doctors and NIMH come with like cyanide gas to basically gas them out, they basically realize, oh, these aren't the rats that we were looking for. These are just common rats. And it's kind of a wasted journey. Whereas the movie is a little bit different. So let me reverse back a bit. So we're going all the way back to where they're in the chamber and they're having an argument saying, what we should do, follow the plan. Well, in the movie, Jenna is still there. Jenna is still alive. And Jenna basically goes, well, like I said, why should we leave? All here's perfect. And Mrs. Frisbee comes in and she basically interferes with it. And she's like, well, sorry to sort of get in the middle of this argument, but I need your help. My husband, Jonathan, apparently you all know him. And you do find out who her husband is and why he was important. But again, I won't give that away. I need your help because my son's very ill. And I spoke to the Great Owl, and the Great Owl said that if I come to you and I speak to Nicodemus, you will be able to help me. So obviously Jenna's there. He hears this. He goes, well, this might be bid to our sort of, I'll be able to take advantage of this. Very skeevy, very snaky. And Mrs. Frisbee goes off. She meets Nicodemus. He ends up giving her a talisman, a necklace. Now, the necklace doesn't exist in the book, but the reason that the necklace was in this, because the necklace was a representation of Mrs. Frisbee's love for her children. And that there is a magic to this necklace that only those of pure heart could really use its full potential, which, again, that comes into importance near to the end of the story. So she meets with Nicodemus. Nicodemus basically tells her who the rats are, what the plan is. And then she basically goes, well, I need to, how are we going to move this without the cat dragon basically finding out? And she goes, well, before we used to send Mr. Ages in and he would knock out the cat, which I love this, by the way. They knock the cat out. They drug the cat so that the cat, gets all dozy and falls asleep so they can do all their sort of scavenging in the night, which I love that. I just think it's great that they drug the cat. I think that's funny. So Miss Frisbee goes, well, Mr. Ages has hurt his leg, so Mr. Ages can't do it, so I will go do it. So she sneaks into the house, she drugs the cat, she gets caught by one of the kids, and this is where she overhears Mr. Fitzpatrick, or Mr. Fitzgerald, the farmer, talk to his wife and his kids about the rat problem, and that he's got in touch with some government people who was interested in rats to come in and take the rats out. But she's like, well, they're coming tomorrow, but I need to warn them. But she's trapped in there because basically one of the lads basically picks her up, finds her, and puts her in a cage. So she escapes. While this is happening, the rats are in the garden in the rain with pulley systems and ropes and all that. It's really impressive. Are moving the house. Like, it's a big sort of it's like a breeze block, basically half buried into the ground, and they pick it up, and the kids are inside. And obviously Timothy's not very well, so he can't move. And then you've got Jenna outside, and he is basically he's there with his sword out, and he's right next to the cabling, to the cables. And he goes, just at the precise moment I'm going to hit it, and it's all going to fall. And he's young, he's sort of accomplice. It's like, no, we can't do it. There's kids in there. We can't do it. Like this is a bad idea. This is not the way of the rat. This is not the way we do things. We're not like this anymore. Like we're sophisticated. Basically, we've come to the point in our evolution where we no longer need to be like this anymore. But Jenna, he's just thinking about himself. He wants to be in control. He wants to, stay here. He likes things how they are. He doesn't want to go to, I think, Fawn Valley to start afresh. So he hits the wires with his sword, breaks them. The breeze block falls and it lands on Nicodemus, and Nicodemus dies. So he takes control, and they're all saying, "Oh God, what happened? What is it? What did we do wrong?" Justin's there, like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. We failed." And then Mrs. Frisbee breaks free. She makes her way there. She's trying to tell him, "Oh God, what happened? What happened? What happened?" And you got Mr. Ages and Justin are inconceivable. Like, "Look, we can't move it. Like, I'm sorry. Like, we tried. The rope snapped, and like, what about the children? Where the children?" She goes, "Oh, the children are fine. They're inside the breeze block, but they're okay." And she's like, "What? Well, I need to warn you anyway. Like, the nymph, they're coming." And Jen is like, no, don't listen to her. And straight away just goes to attack her with a sword. Justin sees this. He's like, "I ain't having this," because he's like the captain of the guard. Gets up, fights him, and it's a really brutal fight. And this is what I love about Don Bluth. This is what I love about Don Bluth movies, is that even though that we all used to joke that his movies were very traumatic, that his movies were very dark, and even though I mentioned the fact of when you read the book is quite lighthearted, there are a few twists and turns here and there. And there are little, tiny little dark bits when they're talking about the lab and the lab experiments and things like that. But overly, it's a very light-hearted tale, basically. It's like a short story, very lovely. And I do appreciate that they decided to go a lot darker, because I'm of the belief that you should never talk down to children. You should never talk down to them in movies. You should never talk down to them with cartoons, TV shows, no matter what it is. You should always talk to I know it sounds weird to say when you're talking about movies and things like that, but you should always talk at children, not down to them. So don't treat them like they're stupid. Just because they're little doesn't mean they're idiots. So kids, like, again, Goosebumps and things like that, kids can handle darker stories. And I think one thing that I feel like you miss with a lot of movies nowadays, and not just movies, but a lot of TV, is the fact of when I grew up watching a lot of these films, there was always a message. As again, best example, Iron Giant. That is a very heartfelt, not dark, but very heartfelt movie that deals with the soul, deals with life, deals with bravery, deals with sacrifice, deals with love, like really deep, complex subject matters that I feel like you don't get really nowadays. And it was in movies, it was in TV shows. I learned a lot of life lessons just by watching a lot of sort of TV and stuff like when I was younger. And I feel like movies nowadays, it's all just for like for example, I've only seen bits of it at the moment, and this is going to date the podcast, but the new Super Mario movie, I've seen bits of it online. And from what I've seen, but also what everybody else has said, that movie is a lot of flashy, flashy, flashy. Remember this, remember that, flashy, flashy, flashy. No coherence, no real story, just kind of, remember this, you like this? Yep. Remember this, you like this? Yep. Very flashy. And there's a lot of movies like this, and there's not many films I could think of. Probably the only one I could really think of is Puss in Boots and the Last Wish, which again dealt with death, dealt with, trauma, anxiety, panic attacks, things like that. That really sort of handles those sort of subjects. Otherwise, you don't get that nowadays. And that's the thing that I love about Don Bluth, and why I love his movies and why I love this movie. It's the fact of it's dark. There's a message to it. The whole idea of mother's love, about bravery, about sacrifice, about doing what needs to be done in order to help the ones that you love, and honor and things like really proper important things where like you could watch this movie and get none of that at all and just enjoy it for what it is. But when you look deeper and you realize, oh, actually, there's a lot more to it than what meets the eye. There's that extra level of appreciation of like, oh, actually, there's a lot more to it, and you can love it and appreciate it more. And it's a thing we've here with this movie. And one thing I do want to talk about is the blood. This movie doesn't run away from showing blood. And I mentioned this in the introduction. I didn't expect as much blood in this as we got. Now, when I say blood, I don't mean gore. I don't mean, somebody gets stabbed in the arm and like it starts like a fountain of blood. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about subject context blood. And what I mean by that is the fact of, if you watch a Disney movie and if somebody's going to get slashed with a sword, the most damage you'll see is that the guy will go, ugh, like that, lean forwards. He'll put his arm around where he's been slashed and then he'll move his hand and then there'll be a bit of clothing or something that has been ripped. That is probably the most you're going to get, and then the guy will just keep going. And then when he wins the fight, he will limp over to the princess or queen or whatever, holding his stomach or his arm or whatever has been sliced. And that's it. And then also the next scene, he's been bandaged up and all is well. With this movie, you have Justin and Jenna fighting each other, and Jenna gets a few swipes in, slice, Justin in his arm. There's a big slice and there's blood, and it's not spurting everywhere, but it starts to trickle. Again, there's another bit with Mrs. Brisby. She's inside the cage. She tries to escape, and as she's trying to get the twine, the metal sort of twine, like basically, imagine if somebody got I was going to say a stapler, but a clip, a note clip, and puts it onto paper, and you bend one of those out of shape, and you got that long piece of metal sort of wire. Somebody tied up that with a cage. So as she's untwining that sort of jumps back, catches her. She she cuts a deep into her arm. And obviously, while Justin and Jenna are fighting, there were a lot of slices, things like that. And for me, even though it's not visceral, even though it's not like in your face, like blood, it's still context subjective, which means, and this is the new word that I've made up, a new sort of phrase, but what that means is basically it adds more weight to the scene. If you see the hero or the villain getting hurt and there's blood, it adds more weight. It adds a stronger tone as the fact of, oh, this is dangerous. This is a life or death situation. This is something I need to sit up and pay attention to. This is a battle of wits, a battle of death. Like, this is something dangerous, basically. I hope I'm sort of conveying that properly, is the fact of it's serious. The context of blood that Disney shies away from still does a pretty good job in their movies, but I feel like that little bit of darkness shows a little more to the passage of life, really. The true context of life is the fact of, you fight around with swords, there's going to be blood, there's going to be these sort of things happening, but it just adds the more sort of weight and depth to the scene, so that while Jenna and Justin are fighting, when you see Justin get struck, because you care about his character, like, oh my God, like he generally could die. That could be a deep gash or really strong gash. We're like, oh my God, this is my favorite character could get hurt right now. Whereas like normally when they're fighting in a Disney movie, there's swords going back and forth, en garde, sort of thing. And then the villain's going to lose. And that. But with this, even if you can sit there and go, oh yeah, I know the villain's going to lose, you don't know that fully because you've been given a glimpse of true life. You've been given a glimpse of potential close sort of touching with death because you've seen blood, because you can still see the wounds. The wound is still there. The wound is not drawn and disappears like it was in Lion King. And I think I also mentioned there's a cut scene in Tarzan, the Disney Tarzan movie, where he's fighting with Shigar, basically the leopard, and the leopard there's a deleted scene where the leopard swipes at Tarzan and cuts the front of his chest, claws. That was taken out of the original sort of run of the movie. It is a deleted scene, and they most likely took it out because, again, it was probably classed as a bit too violent for a Disney movie. Whereas I see, like, if that was in there, that would be like, oh my God, Tarzan, this is dangerous. This is a proper fight sort of thing. I don't know if I'm properly sort of conveying it. Hopefully you can understand what I'm trying to say. But I love the use of blood. So when they have this brutal fight, you're like, oh my God, this is a battle to the death. This is epic. This is something I need to pay attention to because my favorite character could die here and the villain could win, you know. Especially how it wasn't in the book as well, because this scene wasn't in the book. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know, with just like Nicodemus, we're going to lose Justin as well. I did not know, sort of thing. And I'm not going to give it away, but how Jenna dies, I did not see that coming at all. It's very sort of Lord of the Rings. It's very fanciful. It's very sort of Robin Hood sort of thing. Like you just like, oh my God, they did that for a kids movie. Wow. It's really good. It's really good fight scene, and and this is why, even though I appreciate the movie for being a faithful retelling, I love was there's like, you know what, let's, for the dramatic sake and for the sake of it being a movie, let's change it in such a way where the stakes are raised a little bit, but not overly, but it also fits the tone of that darker tone that we're going with. So you've got them in like that medieval dress, you've got them using swords, and to show that sort of Jenna is a villain, he's not only drawn to seem more villainous, whereas Justin, he is a rat, but he's not seen as villain. He's got a lot more softer tones, but Justin has a straight sword, whereas Jenna has a jagged sword. So it kind of shows, that jaggedness shows his villainous side of it. So I love that. I love how they spent time in the animation department designing these characters to fit how they look and to fit the tone, and it's just great. It's like you watch it, and you're like, "This is so good. This is really, really good." And I was just like, I knew it. I knew Don Bluth would do it, obviously he did because it's already came out. But obviously, this movie was able to be that successful that they made another one, and another one, and another one. Well, not more Secret of NIMH. There are more books, but they're not written by Robert O'Brien, who wrote The Secret of NIMH. They're written by other people. So I might or might not read them. I've heard they're good sequels, but there was never another sequel movie, which, again, I'm kind of glad for because I don't feel like it needs it, this film. I feel like this film is a very sort of one and done perfect film that there might be I think there is a sequel to this, but I don't think it was made by Don Bluth. I think it was made by Fox, potentially. Either way, if there is, I might do a review for it for TikTok. So if you're interested, let me know and I'll do a small little review for it for TikTok. One other thing that I want to talk about, which a scene that I love. So after Justin and Jenna have had their fight and Jenna's been killed, the rain starts to come. And when it starts to come, all the mud starts to turn to like quicksand, and the breeze block starts to sink, and the kids are still inside. So you've got Mrs. Frisbee, you've got all the other rats, you've got Justin, all trying their best to kind of pull this breeze block up, but it's sinking too fast, and they can't do it. And the kids are in this breeze block; they're drowning, like they're inside, and the water and mud is coming up, and they're trying to get out, but they can't. And it goes under the water, and they're sitting there crying. And they're like, what can we do? Like, oh my God. And like Mr. Age is like, I'm so sorry. Mrs. Brisby, like, we tried, like, there's nothing we could have done. And Justin, he was just as distraught as he was when he found out that Nicodemus died. And then he just had to have a fight. And then he was just, okay, it's all right, Mrs. Brisby, you can come with us. Your kids and that can come with us. And then for that to happen, he's like, oh my God, you just get hit one after the other of shock of like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like very deep, very dark, very sort of subject matters, but done so quickly and so well. And like, oh my God, like if I was a young kid watching this, I would have been enthralled, and potentially I was, because this movie's always been a movie that's always stuck with me. So there's potentiality. Even though I don't remember the story properly, it's still one of those that still stuck with me, and for good reason, because how good the art is and those sort of quick moments. We're like, oh my God, these deep moments, great. So anyway, Mrs. Brisby, she's like, oh my God, she's crying, she's sobbing, and then all of a sudden the jewel starts to glow, and she takes the jewel off, and it catches fire in her hands, and she drops it, but then she picks it up, and as she picks it up, as it's on fire, it sends like a red light all up through her, into her body. And she becomes like a god. I don't know how to explain it, but she uses like, I would say telekinesis or powers. I can't really put into words. So I'm just going to say telekinesis. She gets this telekinesis and she lifts up the rope and she puts it underneath the loop, the metal ring that's holding the other straps of her home. She lifts it up it's that true sort of analogy of a mother's love, a mother's strength. As I said about, a mother can lift a car off a crying baby. Any woman has this ability. And it's that same sort of iconography where she lifts it up at the ground. She does the impossible, and she's glowing like a star. Beautiful, beautiful visual. And she lifts it up, and then she just gently floats it over to where it was originally going to be put if the rats were able to. Now in the book, the rats, pick up Mrs. Frisbee's home, move it, and pull it to safety, and then all is well there. And then she helps them sort of leave so they can get out before they're discovered by the lab. But in this version, she picks them and she places it there, and then she gives the amulet back to the rats, and then it changes, and then the rat basically it goes back to, you see like a long shot, and you can see the nymph fans. You never see the scientists or the lab people in the movie. You see their lorries and that, and you can see their equipment, and that they're by the rose bush and they're doing sort of work. Obviously in the books it explains what they do, but you don't actually see it in the movie. And then it pans in, and you got Mrs. Frisbee. She is with her children. Jonathan's inside. He can't come outside because it's just a bit too cold still, so he can't really sort of enjoy it. And then one character which I completely forgot to mention, I haven't mentioned yet, but Jeremy the Crow. I love Jeremy, and to be honest, he's voiced by Dom DeLuise. Now, if you don't know Dom DeLuise, he is a renowned voice actor. Possibly one of the best sort of examples I could use for Dom DeLuise. He was Fagin in Oliver and Company. He's also in All Dogs Go to Heaven as well. He did the voice for Itchy. And he's been in a lot. Robot Chicken, Duck Dodgers, Spaceballs animation, Dexter's Laboratory, Monsters Inc., Rugrats. He's been in everything, right? And so he does the voice for Jeremy the Crow. In the books, Jeremy the Crow is basically Mrs. Frisbee helps him. He gets himself tangled up in some wire. She helps him, saves his life, and as she saves his life, what's the word I'm looking for? Dragon the cat goes to attack him, but just before it attacks him, he picks up Mrs. Frisbee. They fly away, and he basically says, so anything you need help with, please let me know. A crow's word is a crow's bond, and that I would always owe you. And then she basically uses Jeremy the Crow to basically help her, to take her to the owl, to help her look after her children, but while she's away with the rats, and also, to basically make sure her kids are safe. Whereas in this one, Jeremy's mostly played for laughs. Again, you don't get Dom DeLuise to do the voice if you're not going to have a little bit of fun with him. So he's made to be a bit of a goofball. He appears a lot more in the story, which again, I do love and enjoy. He's more like the comic relief. He kind of annoys Mrs. Frisbee a lot. Now, you might notice I'm changing the names because in the book, her name's Mrs. Frisbee. In the movie, they changed it to Brisbee. So you might notice that I'm changing it. That's why. But he does kind of get on Mrs. Brisbee's nerves a bit more in the movie, where she's trying her best to be nice. Like, she's very kind. She's trying his message. She knows he wants to help, but he's also being very annoying. So she's trying to think of things of oh, go get all the string you can and then come back. And so by the time he comes back, he's got all this string and it's not worth it. But he's trying to find a mate. He's coming to Mrs. Brisbee. He's asking her for advice on how to get a mate and things like that. So yeah, I love Jeremy in this. Jeremy's fun. He comes back at the end of the movie and he finds a mate, and it's really lovely and sort of kind. It's just a really lovely film. It really, really is. The art and production's gorgeous as well. Again, I can't wax lyrical enough about how I just love the 2D art with the painted backgrounds. There is just I don't know if it's nostalgia. I don't know if it's just a part of me that just likes that, or it just works, that I just love the look of paint next to 2D cells. But when you look at any sort of stills from this movie, it's a work of art. I'm looking at one right now. I've just pulled one up on IMDb. It's basically, if you've seen the movie, you'll know, but it's a scene where Mrs. Brisbee goes to see Mr. Ages, and Mr. Ages, he's got his own little laboratory, and he's got a carpet in there. He's got what looks to be an old lamp and loads of and it's like underneath it is a jar full of water with loads of pipes going. He's got little experiments going on because again he's like a herbologist. He's got loads of like herbs and medicines and that because he looks after all the people and like drying leaves. And just looking at it, yeah, like you can see the art that went into it. Like that painting that in the background must have took somebody forever, such a long time to get the detail to make it look also real and fitting and beautiful. And then you put on seamlessly the 2D animation on top of that, and it just works. Like one thing I used to love playing a game when I was younger, and I played the same game now when I watched this film. When I was younger, when I noticed that you could tell what objects were going to be animated and what were going to be used in the scene, you could tell because when you would watch these movies, objects that were going to be picked up or chairs that were going to be moved or sat down on, these sort of things, they usually had an outline to them so that you could always tell what objects in a scene was going to be used and what was basically background, what was scenery. And I played the same game here with the fact of, when you saw certain objects, you were like, oh, okay, that, that chair's going to be moved, or that phone is going to be picked up. It's going to ring. It's going to be picked up by sort of one of the animated humans that come in. These sort of things, and I appreciate those little bits of detail that you just don't get in sort of modern day animation because everything looks the same because everything's animated. Nothing is hand drawn. That you lose that. You lose that fun of like enjoying the beauty of the background of the painted visualness, but also again the context animation where you get to see those little cells of objects that are going to be used as well. Again, it's little things, but for somebody who is a lover of animation that I am, I appreciate those little scenes. For example, when she goes to see Mr. Ages, and in one scene you have a piece of paper who is basically what in the next scene then is animated for when Mr. Ages picks it up and hands it to Mrs. Brisby. But I love how you get to see it first, how it's just a piece of drawn art, and it's almost as like the characters peel it back like a sticker and turn it from being a piece of background art to 2D, brings it into the 2D realm. And I just love and appreciate that. So it's a game I like to play whenever I watch these sort of films. So yeah, coming to my overall thoughts, because I feel like I've spoken quite a bit about this film already, which a lot more than I thought I was going to. But I feel like when you really watch a movie where you can see the love, the effort, the appreciation of the source material, all of that and more goes into something, you can't help not just, I don't know, you can't help not just wax lyrical about how good it is. But my overall thoughts are, Don Bluth, this is some of his best work. This is just him on top form. You know what I mean? This is basically Don Bluth going, Disney didn't know what they had and I'm going to show them. And this is the result. Like, it's just incredible. And if you haven't seen this film, or if you haven't seen it in a long time, I highly recommend it. I watched it on Amazon Prime. It's free to watch if you have a Prime membership. Watch it on there. It's great quality. I think they more than likely they're possibly high defed it because they always do. It probably runs at like 1080p, so it's a lot more crisper, which I like for these older animated movies as well. Because even though I remember watching it on video when I was younger and having that graininess, watching this movie in high def also allows you to appreciate the art a lot more because it pops a lot more. It's a lot more visual, especially when the moments when Mrs. Brisby lights up like a candle. She looks like she's like a star. Those bits are so spectacular and bright. You're like, oh wow, it just adds more gleam to the glam. So yeah, I would highly recommend this one to everybody. It is a beautiful movie. I'd even recommend the book as well. It's only short. It is a kid's book, but honestly, if you're an adult, you'll still enjoy it. It's called Mrs. Frisby and the Secrets and the Rats of NIMH, which again, I like that title, but I also like the Secrets of NIMH as well. I also like how you never fully learn what NIMH is. You never fully learn about it in the book. You never fully learn about it in the movie. And I appreciate that because some things are better told than known about. And what I mean by that is the fact of some tales, it's better to not know the full backstory, to allow your brain to fill in the gaps. So even though you get a few more scenes and moments with the scientists and what happens in the lab and you do in the movie, you're still left with that question of, well, why were they doing the experiments? What was the experiments all about? Were they trying to hunt down these rats? What were they going to do with these rats when they found them? And these sort of things, because you do kind of read the book and think, are the rats just paranoid? Have they got to the point where they're that smart that they're worried about anybody knowing who they are or where they are, even though they're making sure that other animals don't know or like about them, and that, you know, Mrs. Brisby's been sworn to secrecy, even though Mrs. Brisby is a mouse, a normal mouse, and that she can't talk to humans, as far as, you know, I don't think they can in the book or in the movie universe. But yeah, so I love that extra bit of detail, and I love how they don't give it away. So I love the title of The Secret of NIMH, because again, it does stay a secret. You learn enough as you need to know, but not too much. And I like the title of the book as well. So yeah. But that's my thoughts. What do you think? Let me know what you think of The Secret of NIMH. Do you love this movie? Is it your favourite Don Bluth movie? What is your favourite Don Bluth movie? Are you a fan of Rockadoodle? You know what I mean? Are you a fan of An American Tail or All Dogs Out of Heaven? Which I'm not looking forward to that one, because that's going to break me. That movie broke me when I was young, and it's broke me ever since. And it's a movie that stuck with me. You know, that's one of the films, look back when people say, you know, that guy Don Bluth, he likes to traumatise children. You know, All Dogs Out of Heaven is basically up there with, you know, A Land Before Time. But I'm looking forward to it all the same. So let me know down below your thoughts and feelings in the comments on YouTube or Spotify. So before we go, I do want a bit of trivia, because there is quite a bit of trivia here for this movie. So Don Bluth, John Pomeroy, and Gary Goldman all left Disney to pursue this project, which had originally been rejected by their former employee as too dark to be a commercial success. They were followed soon after by 20 other Walt Disney production animators, dubbed the Disney defectors by the trade press. Now, it's funny that they mention that, because while I was watching this, I did sit there and go, I don't think Disney would do this. Or if they did, it would be very lighthearted. You know, they wouldn't go this dark. And I think, again, they stopped going dark after the Black Cauldron. I feel the Black Cauldron was their try at doing a dark tale. But I feel like, as they don't talk about that anymore and they pretend like it don't exist, that's one of the movies where it's like, after the Black Cauldron, they just stopped trying that. So I get where they're coming from when they say it's too dark, but again, if you read the book, I never read the book as dark. I read the book as being lighthearted. This movie is dark, you know. But I feel like if Disney did do it, they more than likely would they would have made it more lighthearted, I think. At the time of release, it was the largest non-Disney animated movie. That's another thing that I've found as well by doing my Don Bluth research, is the fact that he was always on the coattails of Disney. You know, Disney had no competition at the time, apart from Don Bluth. No other studio could compete with Disney apart from Don Bluth. You know, everything that Disney said that couldn't be done, he did it and proved to them it could be done. I.e., Disney said this movie was too dark and it wouldn't be a commercial success. This movie came out and it was a commercial success. So much so that he did another movie with Steven Spielberg, his next one, which was American Tail. Just saying, you know. The lead character's name was changed from Mrs. Frisbee in the novel to Mrs. Frisbee to avoid legal entanglements from the Wham-O company, makers of the Frisbee. The small dragonfly, the small dragonfly, Mr. Aegis chases after near the beginning of the movie, is a nod to Eventrude from Disney's The Rescuers, one of the last movies Don Bluth worked on at Walt Disney before leaving the company. This was Jerry Goldsmith's first music score for an animated movie. He later said that it was among his personal favourites. He was instrumental in introducing the movie to Steven Spielberg, who went on to work with Don Bluth on An American Tail. According to Don Bluth and Gary Goldman in their DVD commentary, Goldsmith so loved the movie that he volunteered an extra 3 weeks to polish and refine the score, even though he was not contractually obligated to do so. And again, I never mentioned the music because I'm not very good when it comes to music. I don't know how to best convey how music makes me feel, apart from saying it makes me feel good, you know. But the music is very, very powerful in this film. The movie also heralds a return to using the multi-plane camera for scenes requiring depth, especially Nicodemus's magic hologram, and in the opening sequence where the aid of lit animation, the wise old rat beckons magic vapors from an inkwell to grace the pages of an ancient book with fairy gold lettering. I love this scene. It's at the very beginning of the movie, and as he sort of dips his sort of quill into this magic ink, like there's a puff of like smoke that comes out of it, and he doesn't even touch the page. And as he just twiddles the quill among the paper, words start to appear in like fiery gold, and it's just absolutely, it's a beautiful, gorgeous sort of scene. That's another thing that I love about this movie as well. In the book, the rats are technologically advanced in terms of like building society. Everything is very technical based. Whereas this, like I said, it went more of a darker fantasy taste. So they use magic as well. And again, that works for a lot more sort of older, wizard-y, wise-looking Nicodemus. Whereas in my imagination, I imagined a very young rat who was a leader. And obviously, in the book, Nicodemus, he doesn't die. Nicodemus goes off with his people to begin another life. And I think at the end of that book, one of the characters, I think it's Mrs. Frisbee's son Martin, basically goes, "I want to go find the rats. I want to go thank them." And like she's like, "Maybe one day when you're older." So I don't know if they do in the next stories. Where is it? Okay, I've got one more. In late August 1982, Walt Disney Productions barred several theaters from booking this movie as a double feature with Tron. Disney claimed that the studio wanted their movie to be paired with another Disney movie. A Los Angeles Times article said that the action was due to bitter feelings over Don Bluth's exit from the company. Yeah, that does feel very bitter to me. But as I said, and as we'll find as we go through these movies, Don Bluth, whenever a big Disney movie would come out, the same day a Don Bluth movie would come out. And for a long time, Don Bluth was Disney's only competition. And each time he batted them back each time. And again, if he had his own art style, like if you watch The Rescuers, you can tell the bits that Don Bluth animated because he has a unique art style. It's the same here. Like all the characters, even though they're animals, they have a certain look to them. And all the humans have a certain look. But yeah, so that's all I have to say about this movie. If you are interested in any, like I said, any more Don Bluth stuff, and you can't wait until I talk about An American Tail, which hopefully we'll get around to this year, then like I said, you can always check out my review of A Small One and Banjo the Woodpile Cat over on TikTok. Give them a watch, give them a listen, like and a comment, and all that other stuff that you do on TikTok. And yeah, if you want to hear more of this kind of reviews from me in the future, make sure that you like and subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to leave me a 5-star review, as well as to follow me on Spotify. And yeah, follow me on Instagram, as well as TikTok and all that jazz. So I've been your host, Luke the Elder Bean. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to talk about The Secrets of NIMH today. It's a movie that I didn't think was going to be as good as rememberable as I thought. Like I always had faith in Don Bluth, but again, as I've already mentioned, I had a lot different sort of interpretation of what this movie was going to be. So I was greatly surprised to find out that it wasn't, and that it was actually a lot better. So I am glad for that. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. I've been your host, Luke Howdy Beans. You've been listening to the Howdy Beans podcast, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye-bye.